Hello, welcome to Super Connected Conversations. I haven't done this in a while, and they've become sort of impromptu sessions that are mostly unplanned conversations with people that I love, admire, have been inspired by, influenced by on my Super Connected album and film project. This is really special because Douglas Rushkoff is the first person who said he would talk to me about these subjects, of which he is so knowledgeable when it comes to AI and humanity, Team Human, which is his wonderful contribution to the technology versus humanity debate. I think it's going to be a lasting legacy for many, many years to come, and to put my project through his lens helps me understand more about the world that we're living in, and now, especially in context of the smartphone-free childhood movement, debate, and conversation festival that's happening. So, as usual, we just started talking, so there's no beginning to this conversation between me and Douglas, but you will be able to see that right now. When you were talking about that on, I can't remember which, it might have been South by Southwest 2013. It's quite an old one. And when you started talking about, you said the word asynchronous a couple of times. And it really resonated with me in what I experience with online social media a lot, that time doesn't seem to have any root anymore.
Right. And that's partly right, because digital technologies don't live in time. They have clock speeds, but they're digital. They're this cycle, this cycle, this cycle, that cycle.
Yeah.
It's like now. It's like the digital clock, as compared to the analog clock, which goes around and is telling us continuous story and corresponds to the way your body feels moving through time and space. A digital clock it's 12:01. It's 12:02, right? So each change is a new boom, boom, boom. And digital technologies are like that too, in that they're all stacked. Here's another email. Here's another message. Here's another thing. You flip to the flip to the flip. So you're in this sequence of events rather than any sense of continuity.
It's funny. I was talking to Kevin Godley, and he was talking about creative process with everything that's happening with AI, that it's missing out the journey. It's instant. You can just, you think of an idea and you press a button and you get it, right? And it seems very similar to what you're talking about with time, is that we're missing and he was saying the reason why he thinks that's not great for creativity is that you don't get mistakes. And mistakes, as Brian Wilson pointed out, are brilliant, because when you make a mistake, you do it another 3 times.
Yeah. Well, it's also, they're not mistakes. They're not mistakes. It's back to the auto-tuning culture, right? If you take Ariana Grande and you want her to hit the perfect 440 hertz auto-tune her, and you create a better product for capitalism. But if you take James Brown, right, who's reaching up for that note, he's reaching there, or Tina Turner, who comes out, she comes down in over the note, right? The technologist with autotune would see that coming over the note or reaching up for the note. They would call that noise, right? The note is the signal and the reaching is the noise. But as far as we're concerned, that's not the error. That's not the noise. That's the signal. That's the way you hear James Brown through time, is the way that human being reached for the note. When we excise that from our reality, we are the computers. We're no longer the humans.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What you just said reminds me exactly of making records in the 90s, when I started making records, compared to maybe a few years ago in a studio with an engineer, and they're listening back and they kind of go, yeah, it's a bit pitchy there.
And I'm kind of going, but I understand what it's communicating. Why do we need to put it all into and it is the auto tuning thing, and that never happened in the 90s. I mean, it just didn't happen. We worked with a producer on some music, and it didn't need to be in tune to be brilliant. I mean, to be fair, most of the Beatles records aren't perfectly in tune, but my God, I mean, it's magical, right?
Well, then even perfectly in tune, what is the value system? And it's hard for people. They're probably listening and thinking, well, if you can't really hit an A, are you really a great singer? And it's like, no, like Ringo Starr's drumming lagged the rhythm of the music intentionally. It had this, and in his breaks, they called them falling down the stairs drum breaks, right? Because they were kind of, but that was the whole point. With that slight hesitation lag thing was the sound of the Beatles, right? That was part of what it was. He wasn't the problem. He was the perfection, the human perfection of it. And the value system that will look at, if you have two notes, as you know, you're tuning a guitar. If you take the two notes and make them slightly different, you get a wah wah, right? You get that tremolo between those notes. If you walk into a room where they're playing gamelan, which are like these, for people who don't know, sort of Indonesian small xylophones that make their music. Gamelans are tuned on a different scale where the music is the binaural rhythm between those notes, the intervals going. It's like Buddhist overtone chanting where you hear
Throat singing.
right. That's the signal, right? So again, pitchy. You're pitchy, right? Your product is not the perfect Western thing. And digital, because digital is quantized, people always forget digital. There's nothing between the yes and the no. There's nothing between each demarcation. Digital only understands things if it's in a notch. Again, if it's at 12 or 1201 or 1202, it understands a notch. So when everything has to be notched, it creates a value system where everything has to be exactly somewhere on the grid in order to be recognized. Anything that's not on the grid in the liminal spaces where life actually happens is ignored by the system.
Not to get too wide on it, but I'd love to know what you think about this. I spoke about this recently with another musician, and they were saying, yeah, but in the 16th century, you could hear there was different intervals between the notes because of the scale they used, and they simplified that with the piano, and so that's why we have equal temperament now instead of and this is just another version of that. I just wonder on that long arc, which I know you do look at things from, long arc of history and evolution. What does it mean? I'm like, I can't listen to any music that's new that's been auto-tuned. I don't think it makes me like, just because I'm older. I think I would have felt like that in the 90s too. And I'm like, where's the life? Where's the grit? Where's the mess? Where's the Johnny Rotten? But maybe it is because I'm getting older. I don't know. But what do you think? Do you think there's another stage? Do we just end up with like pure tones? And it reminds me of that scene in the Superman film, when he's in the crystal cave.
Yeah.
He speaks to his father. It's like everything is perfectly laid out.
Yeah. Well, we reach a point. I mean, it's like medicine reaches a point where we've sterilized everything to the point where we realize, oh, we've killed the gut biome, which is actually a living thing that we need in order to live. By keeping our children out of the dirt, we've deprived them of the soil microbes that actually we've co-evolved with over time. By cleaning everything, we lose the fungus, and the fungus should be among us, right? It's essential. So I think we reach that aesthetically as well. You have the industrial age comes, and the industrial age, we get both equal temperament keyboards and harpsichords that are going to be exact, but we also got the printing press, which took beautiful manuscript, personal manuscript writing and illuminated manuscripts, and turned it to industrial text, where every text now looks the same and there's all these letters, and we end up being this alphabet society as opposed to the East that had this sort of pictograph alphabet, and we developed in this very rigid, it was on the way to digital, to that. But each time there's one of those things, so there's a printing press in the industrial age, you get this cultural pushback in terms of romanticism. The romantic poets and Byron and Shelley and Keats, they were at the same time as the beginnings of steam engines and all that kind of stuff. So now we have another one. We have the sort of digital regimentation of our society, this blockchainification of our world. And hopefully there's a countercultural and a cultural shift towards, and we see it. What does it mean to be human? And that's everybody wondering. We get AIs directing everything. And without the AIs, a lot of people wouldn't even ask, what makes us different from AIs? What is a human being? And how does that matter? I mean, that's where, Team Human comes from, is saying, what does it mean to be human in an age of automation? And do human beings matter? Do we want to continue to emulate and imitate our machines, like getting auto-tuned so we sound as perfect as a synthesizer? Or do we want to recall, what is it that we have that the perfect note doesn't, right? What is it that Joni Mitchell is doing, and Tina Turner and the great singers? What are they doing? Are they exactly perfect, or are they doing something? Do we sense them for the ways that they move away from the line, that they move away from the quantized perfection of digital?
Yeah. When you describe it like that, it's freedom that it is that you're identifying, right?
Right. We can move between. I mean, the computer, the AI lives on the ticks of the clock. Human beings, we live in the space between the ticks, that duration when the second actually happens. And that's the part, I mean, especially when we're talking to young people, that's what we have to start to get them to experience again, to value again. It's not the metric, it's the friendship. What's the quality of my friendship rather than the number of friends I have on the thing? My streak. Your streak is the number of days that you've connected with somebody. Yeah. If you're working toward the streak, you're not working with the friendship, right? It's more a matter of, did you connect that day, not what was the quality of that connection. The digital can count along with you, but it can't experience the thing. So when we're trying to remember, what does it mean to be human in an age of AI? It's about, how do we restore the primacy of our experience? And in order to do that, we have to recalibrate ourselves, to humanity. These devices, they are designed in places in Silicon Valley to decalibrate you. That's what they are for. To make you uneasy, to disconnect you, to get your feet off the ground, to get you to hold your breath so that you can be manipulated by it, so that your data can be tracked, so that you can be steered toward one thing or another. When you stop this, and I've been asking people, what I'm asking for to start is 10 seconds a week. 10 seconds. I want people to find it somehow. I know it's hard. Find 10 seconds each week to be with someone else and just look in their eyes. It's a big ask, but to ask our kids that, to ask our friends that, find it, that 10 seconds to be with someone else and make, not even over Zoom. I mean, actually in real life, in a place. You can hold their hand if you want, or if that's too much, to work up to that. But be with somebody, breathing, looking in their eyes for 10 seconds. And then maybe the next week, try to do it for 20 seconds. If you can't do it 20 seconds all at once, do it twice for 10 seconds on different days, so you have time to recover from the intensity of that experience. But that 10 seconds is all you need to recalibrate your nervous system back to an organic, internally generated rhythm. It's so worth it if you can find the time.
That's a beautiful exercise and to do. And actually, I'm going to mention that to everyone that's working on the Super Connected show, because we do it. Kate, obviously, I mean, as an actor, she knows about real human connection, but also as a communication facilitator. That's one of her jobs. You know, she needs people to communicate in difficult circumstances, like with the NHS and stuff. And those looking in the eye things have become, we all now often, aren't we, with phones, and we're, yeah, sure, Doug, it's really common. But you kind of brought us to one of the things I want to talk to you about that was happened here and in the last month, which is the smartphone free childhood movement. And it's the idea, of course, that 13 is just too young to be receiving what comes through the apps like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. This kind of, while we're still naturally developing and rewiring in our brains, there's this other force that is just too robust for young minds, which of course my album is all about that. We're just about to go on the road with it. And I said to Kate, what brought us together was Team Human. I said, we've got to talk to Doug, and I'm so grateful that you sent books from New York all the way to the United Kingdom so that we can just get, into conversations with people after our shows. And I've had people ask me already, how did you start learning about it? Well, I read this and I read that. And, and your whole Team Human movement is a huge inspiration for those of us that have been aware of these dangers and diversions away from our natural embodied human selves. What, now that it's kind of all out in the open at the moment, it's not an easy bind to get out of. What do you think about it all?
I mean, it's interesting. You talk to younger children about these devices, and certainly until they're 8 or 9 or 10, most of them are upset that their parents are trapped in their devices. You talk to them, you interview them, they'll say, yeah, I'm at the playground trying to get my dad's attention and he's always looking at his phone. Or I'm concerned, we're at dinner and I want to say what happened at school and they're looking at their phone, or they get distracted by a thing. They're always following the ding, and I'm reminded of like Marshall McLuhan. He said way back when, I mean, he was in the 60s and 70s, and he said, what do you think your dog thinks when the phone rings and you get up and dutifully answer it? That must be your master, right? It's your master calling. So we set that up for our children ourselves, and then they enter into that world. And some of them are, oddly enough, some of them are better equipped to deal with the coercive nature of these devices than we are, because they've witnessed us failing and have corrected for it in their heads. But for the most part, these technologies, now aided by artificial intelligence, what they're doing is trying manipulation techniques on us and our children, using what works and feeding that back into the program, and then trying something else, and then trying something else. And everything that works on us, they share with all their little AI friends to try it on Johnny and Mary and Tina and Pete, right? And then they see what worked on it. Oh, they all report back and they all try something else. So your 9-year-old or 10-year-old with a device is trying to resist. And resistance just means staying conscious, staying sane, staying embodied, staying non-suicidal, non-cutting, non-anorexic, non-everything, that maintaining basic mental and physical health against a multi-billion-dollar industry using the very best technologies available to pierce through that psychic armor. And frankly, it's really not fair to take someone whose brain is developing, who doesn't have myelin sheaths on the frontal cortex yet to protect and to help develop impulse control and executive functioning, to subject that developing mind to all of these techniques and technologies that we haven't even evolved with. Right? We have 500,000 years of frontal lobe evolution that's trained on clouds and lightning and tigers and plants, not on technologies that create a new generation every 5 or 10 seconds. So it's just not fair to submit them to this. It's not the technology itself that's doing it. It really is. I'm not saying, guns don't kill people. People kill people. Guns are certainly more biased toward killing people than pillows are. But these devices don't have to be manipulation machines. They don't have to be in the hands and in the service of giant multinational corporations who do not care about us, right? They could be used differently. But the apps that end up in the ecosystem of your child's smartphone, all trained at decalibrating them, at making them uneasy, at making them emotionally unstable in order to manipulate them. And it's not really fair, but it's not to say that these technologies themselves are bad. Right? These technologies have certain biases, right? They're biased towards the disembodied. They're biased towards the non-local. They're biased towards kind of the antisocial. They're biased toward data. And that's fine. Data is important. You're going to get information. Where is this person? Who are they with? What's going, this and that and that. But they don't have any prana, right? They don't have any anything other than data. They can't, right? They're not part of our sensory apparatus and they're part of our real world. So when we're using them to substitute for embodied experience, we always end up kind of short, right? We always end up wanting. And I think the object of the game now, and it's a hard one for parents, is to convince kids experientially that, playing with dirt and with each other and seeing the sky and breathing the air and touching the grass is more pleasurable, is more blissful than looking at a shiny AI drawn picture on an iPad.
This is passionate work for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it's like stand up in a way, or a revival meeting or rabbinic, but because I'm trying to help kind of engender human spirit. It's a revival. It's a retrieval, a retrieval meeting. It's funny that the team human meme, if you will, the idea came to me when I was on this panel debating a transhumanist. I was debating a Google scientist who believes that humanity should accept our eventual extinction, that computers and robots will be smarter than us and process information better than us, and that we should pass the evolutionary torch to them. Maybe upload our minds to computers as best we can, but accept our inevitable extinction, keep the lights on for the computers, and then fade away when we're not needed anymore. And that's when I said, no, I think human beings are special. Human beings can appreciate music and sex and art and ambiguity and the in-between. A human being can watch a David Lynch movie and not understand what it means and still experience that as pleasure. What is that? That human beings deserve a place in the digital future. And he said, "Oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're human." Like it was hubris. And that's when I said, okay, fine, guilty. I'm on team human. And that was really what started it. And then, the construction of team human, as I thought about it more, I like the idea that being human is a team sport, that you can't be human alone, that any device or technology or system that is alienating you from other people is not serving you. It's not serving humanity, that things that actually bring us together in real ways, those are supporting human. So then how can I help convince people that this neoliberal libertarian understanding of the world, that we are in a battle for survival of the fittest individual, that's not who we are or how we evolved, that human beings, to the extent that we are the most evolved species, it's because we have the greatest capacities for cooperation and collaboration, that we've sacrificed so much in order to communicate. Just having a voice box that can speak, that's why human beings can choke. The change in the trachea, to allow speech makes us vulnerable to dying by choking to death. But it was worth it. It was worth it on an evolutionary level to be able to be with each other in that way. So all of my work then really after that has been about that. How do I help people see that, that they should want to develop the rapport with other humans in order to synchronize with them and be with them in ways that engender solidarity and working together. And that's the great danger to the powers that be, is human beings being together. The word conspiracy just means conspire, breathe with, to breathe with someone else. That's the conspiracy. Human beings breathing together, because that's where we're dangerous and unpredictable, connected human beings.
Oh yeah, you're reminding me of the Robert Anton Wilson quote now about conspiracy theory just means that you and a group of people are like controlling the world, and you should think of that as you and your friends or something. I don't know the exact.
Right. Yeah, that we are we are the Illuminati. We are, and then once you realize that, it's like, oh, you mean the conspiracy is people who are alive. And you have that experience, haven't you ever gone to a concert or a rave that was just crazy and wonderful, and everybody has had that peak experience together, that oh, there is something else here. And then you go to work or you're walking around the next day in the city and you see someone else and you don't recognize them specifically, but you make eye contact in that way that says, you were there too, weren't you? Yeah, I was there too. And it's like,
Yeah.
they know they were there. And it's like, what is that? And it's like, I have it now almost all the time. I just walk around in the city, not on my phone. And you make eye contact with you find another one. It's like, oh, hi, I'm here. And they're like, yeah, I see you too. And it's like, just that passing moment of recognition, there's another living one, in this world of body snatched cyborgs. There's another. So the conspiracy that I'm trying to be part of is the conspiracy of people who are awake in that way, in the fun way, whatever's going on, even if this whole thing is going down, right? We're alive.
I love that. I've never heard that experience sort of talked about as maybe a measurable unit of something. I don't know what it is, but it's very specific, isn't it? It's like I did that. I went to see Kate Bush when she came back after 30 years and did her shows in Hammersmith, and there was somebody going as well. It was an important, event. And we did exactly that. We looked at each other and went, oh, God, you're going as well. We didn't need to speak, didn't say anything, but the eye contact did so much in the way that, yeah, of course, digital.
I am. Are you? I mean, I'm sure it's what, in the 60s and 70s, what, gay men in New York, they'd go to the Lower West Side and they'd find another one. And it's like, oh, hi, and just to be out as, now in this world, that's the irony. To be out as human is to be part of a strange, dangerous counterculture.
Yeah. And when you mentioned the word counterculture, and I'm glad you did before I did, because it always feels like that your work is very rooted in a heart wisdom from that time. I watched the trial of the Chicago Seven the other day.
Mm.
Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and all that crazy stuff. And I did a reading of Allen Ginsberg's Howl last week for his. There was a Allen Ginsberg in London exhibition, so it's very sort of in my ether at the moment, that whole counterculture thing. And one thing that I've heard you talk about, which I love, regarding the internet and the digital revolution, is that was kind of a great hope for people that came out of the counterculture. It isn't like technology on one side and embodied hippies on the other. There's actually a relationship there, isn't there?
Well, yeah, because we were in the culture of top-down media, William Randolph Hearst and Rupert Murdoch and television, where it was what technologists would call a read-only media. You couldn't interact with it. It just was piped into your home. It was commercial propaganda. And for those of us raised in that world, even when music was, bless his heart, but it was all Bill Graham presents, it was all, you know what I mean? It was sort of commercial, corporate,
Ed Sullivan.
yeah, Clear Channel was starting to buy the radio spectrum. It was like, where was us? And the internet originally was the weird, alternate, unloved, dangerous medium. It was where we were going to play. Fuck the big time. We're going to do this ourselves together. So it was a cyberpunk, bottom up, kind of hippie, homebrew, West Coast psychedelic thing. I mean, the psychedelics kids were all being hired to work in Silicon Valley because they were the only ones who had experience hallucinating new realities into existence, which was what the internet felt like. Before the internet was there, when all we had was some machines, we had to imagine, what could a network look like? How could we interact? What will we do? Will we talk? Will we have files? Will we have bulletin boards? And how will it be? Those were very creative people, and we were imagining a kind of a countercultural utopia, alternative space to the mainstream media. So the mainstream media had the light of day, and we would at night talk with each other and share our strange dreams in these other spaces. But, Wired magazine and big companies came along and said, oh, there's money in them their heels, and they took the place over.
I was about to say, I mean, the way you describe it, it sounds like the kind of dreams that we all have when we're in our late teens and we want to change the world and we want to make it a better place. And then it just kind of sounds like, I guess Steve Wozniak is in there, right? A lot of,
and Jobs and Wozniak. I mean, they came up with
yeah.
the idea of the Apple computer while tripping at Reed College. This was part of and they called it Apple because it was literally the apple from the Bible, right? The apple that Eve, took the bite out of. They were saying, this is it. You take the apple. This is the forbidden fruit.
Yeah, drop
that was,
yeah. How
and
did all of that, how do you think all of those, whether it's, Apple, Google, Facebook's it's slightly different, but, all the companies that we sometimes unfairly lump together as tech giants,
yeah.
But they are so almost like a kind of religious presence in our lives now. How does that, in your mind, how did it change from being, the outsiders suddenly turning into the restrictive face of authority?
I know, it is odd, isn't it? I mean, there are a few, I kind of blame two things. One is, what I was saying is big business and capitalism. That we were trying to frame to use a psychedelic terminology, the set and setting of the internet was going to be, peace and connection, weirdness. We were folding the weird edges of society back into the center. We were looking at, really the way we thought about it is, what is the potential of the connected human imagination, you know, the collective human imagination. What will we dream up together? We had all read, you know, the Gaia hypothesis by James Lovelock, that the planet is one organism, and the net was going to allow the humans to engage with each other in this whole, you know, in this whole new way. And 1993, 1994, along comes Wired magazine that comes up with a new set and setting for the internet, which was surveillance and control. How are we going to make money off this thing? And when you're betting on internet companies, you're no longer looking at how are we going to increase the wild possibilities of human culture. You are looking at how do we increase the probability that the things we bet on will make money. So you're looking at all the humans using the internet. Originally, the counterculture was thinking, how can we increase the wide possibilities of creative output? Now, business is looking at how can we narrow the probability of the outcome we want? So instead of giving people technology to do weird things, we use technology on people to get them to do predictable things. So the polarity was reversed. These are not tools for people to express themselves. These are tools for corporations to enact their will on human beings. So you're not programming the machine is programming you, right? You don't do what you want with an AI. A company does with AI what it wants to you. So when you pick up the phone, the smartphone is getting smarter about you as you get dumber about it. And it's that polarity, that shift, I think is the main problem. The other one that I've looked at more recently is just the tendency of technologists, of men who love technology, to want to control people and nature. If you look, the history of science has been one of reducing the complexity of nature to manageable, bite-sized numerical chunks. It was Francis Bacon, the founder of empirical science, who said, science will let us take nature by the forelock, hold her down, and submit her to our will. Right? So if that's the tradition that Steve Jobs and Wozniak and Bill Gates is, how do we take nature by the hair and hold her down and have our way with her? How do we use these technologies to control nature, to tame nature? Because nature's scary, nature's female, nature's wet, nature's soil and dirt and the moon and the forest and the fairies and all that. How do we control that? You end up in a technological environment like the one we're living in, where we feel controlled by our technologies. We feel all the weirdness is stamped out, all the fertility, all the wonder is gone. And then the only people that look to be protesting effectively against it is the extreme right wing, the one who say it's a conspiracy against humans, against labor, against, you know, and you've got, in America anyway, you've got the weirdest of the weird are the ones who are in some ways saying the loudest protest.
You've been very prophetic in a lot of your work, you know. So I have to ask you, where do you think this will go? Because, and I'm saying this from at the brink of something that I've been waiting for a lot of people, certainly in the UK at the moment, that are really passionate about, certainly young people, not living a phone-based childhood. You know, you're a father. It's a sacred. I was a child. It's a sacred time. When we get older, we love looking back on it. We have these memories which are impossible to recreate, but they're treasurable to us and can give us hope as we move forward in our life. Childhood is so sacred. And so it's great that seems to be the center of a lot of people's attention here in the UK at the moment, because of smartphones and the addiction to the apps, the social media apps, really. Where do you think it will go? Because I kind of see Apple and Google and all those companies, they always know and everything probably 5 or 6 years before we know, in terms of the devices and features that they roll out, right? They're in there a lot earlier. So if this wave of parents, passionate parents, is like it's a big wave that's rising right now. I don't think those large tech companies haven't thought that that might be coming. What's their response? They're going to go into another business. They're going to stop making smartphones. They're going to start making e-ink iPhones, or that hurt
No,
your.
just sort of from a on the ground tactical perspective, they will create regulatory bodies that they run. They will use the opportunity to lock in their monopoly power. So they'll create a regulatory body that makes it, that they get to make rules with a few representatives from health and government, in there. So they get to make the rules, and the rules that they make will only be possible for themselves to follow. Right. So you'll be unable to create a new social media app that
Right.
does all of the millions of dollars of things that an app will have to do in order to be used by young people. I mean, that's why Facebook is so, desperate for, to have this new law of parents having control over what app goes into the phone, because Instagram's already on the phone. They want the parents that pull up the ladder behind them, so they're the only ones. So on a practical level, it's that. What they're really planning for, as I show in my last book, Survival of the Richest, is most of them think the whole world's ending. Most of the people running these companies don't let their kids use these devices anyway. They've got retreats and bunkers and luxury cruise ships and seasteading islands. They think civilization is ending, and they're trying to make as much money as possible and develop AI and virtual reality and other technologies, as many possible ways out for themselves and their families as they can muster, as civilization goes down. And I would say, even if they're right and this civilization is ending, then the most important thing for your kids to be able to have is the ability to communicate and be with other people, and develop systems of mutual aid, and understand how to create a local economy, how to get their hands in the dirt, how to do permaculture farming, how to take care of one another. If this thing is going, it's no longer, your skill is not how well can you find a bargain at the mall using an app, right? That's not the 21st century skills that they're going to need. They're going to need something much more closer to the skills that the CEOs of tech companies are seeing that their kids have. Yeah. And they're sending their kids to agricultural camps, right? They're sending and other things.
I love that. And then when you said it, it just made me realize I finished my education at a Rudolf Steiner school. So I went to a low tech school, and that was, an incredible school if you're into arts at all. But also, I'm very grateful for not having, they had rules about when you can't watch TV, and you couldn't even read until you're 7. There was a whole there's a way that the child's mind is developing. Ironically, our Tory government in this country have been hell-bent for the last 30 years on getting rid of Steiner schools. But which is interesting, that those are the very schools that all the tech giants in Silicon Valley send their children to.
Yeah, and they did a study. There was concern from parents that because Rudolf Steiner schools didn't introduce students to computers until senior year of high school, that they would be somehow delayed. And what they found out was that students introduced to computers in senior year of high school actually learned programming faster than people who had been exposed to them from the time they were little. So it all works. Annie Lennox is just fine, and you are too. It's okay to sort of learn how to be human in the order that humans learned it. That's sort of what I would see the ideal childhood is. You introduce technologies to childhood sort of in the same order that human beings develop them. So you recapitulate the development of civilization over the course of their childhood. And then, yeah, as they become 18 or 19, here's what's being used today. And it's It's a sweet model, kind of spiral dynamic, Rudolf Steiner sort of the fractal model of education that I would
Yeah,
implement were I king.
yeah. Sherry Turkle, who I know you obviously know and have
Yeah.
spoken with, was one of the other big inspirations for me for Super Connected, and I still use this thing that she said, I think maybe at a talk once, to defend myself when people often, whether it's critics or friends or other musicians, are just like, you're just anti-technology. I'm like, I'm not anti-technology, I'm pro-conversation. And it sort of stops some people in their tracks. It's like, and they realize they're silencing you by saying you're anti something. And it's like, no,
Right.
I'm not anti like you. I was I'm a first adopter especially with Apple products. But when they stop,
Yeah.
when the tech is shutting down the conversation, it's like, well, what's it for? What would your advice be?
You can create the standard as a community. If you have a community, it's really hard to if you don't. But then you do, and it's not like you're Mormons or something or Amish, like it doesn't have to be that regimented. It's just kind of a social norm. So ideally, in a real community, your kid, their social group, and you could talk with the other parents. Say, what do we think? When do we want this? When do we want this to be? It's why it's so much easier to do these things on a local level than some top-down national level. Then you're just individuals listening to Oprah rather than, a group of people in a town. So you want to start a pod. What I guess what we're saying is if you want your kids to have a healthy, normal social life, you kind of have to model that yourselves as adults, and then you have the means as well to create those social norms.
It's really great speaking to you and listening to you. So, I mean, it's like every 3 or 4 minutes, it's like a rock song listening to you. When are we going to see you in the UK again?
I don't know. I mean, I get
Last time it's been before the pandemic. You haven't been back.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was before. Yeah, one of those Oxcom things, or I don't know. I mean, I'm traveling less because I understand getting on a plane is partly destroying the planet, and I'm trying to model a bit more local things, but no, it would be great to come out, especially in the summer rather than in the rain.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, if there's a proper
It's still
festival
freezing here.
yeah,
I'm getting
no,
through March and it's
I should come out. It's either it's always got to be some combination of fun, meaning, and money to do it, right? Because like you, like anybody, it's boy, it's a struggle to be real, and
yeah.
make ends meet. But it's usually that if I can make enough money to really buy a bunch of carbon offsets or do some good with the money, and I feel like my coming over is not just a rich white Western indulgence. I see so many. I mean, I look at people like, oh, I'm going to go and talk about climate in, Paris tomorrow, and then I'll be in Austin on Thursday. It's like,
Well,
really? And I'm always like, and if I look at it in another, I don't want to look at it that way in myself. But now that my daughter's in college and hopefully becoming, requiring less sort of day-to-day management, if I can come to the UK and come for, 3 weeks and really be there, it feels like a way more efficient use of plane fare than, the way people do it, where they fly in, do a talk, and fly out in a day or two. It's like, oh.
well, we'll be reaching out to our partners and see if we can get you over, because I think you're very much needed. I think your view, your optimism, your spirit, and your amazing catalogue of work is so important to us at the moment. I've loved chatting to you again, but we do need to do it eye to eye.
We do.
In the real wonder.
We'll do it. Get a big venue and play music and talk and
yeah.